And a good spiritual morning to you once again. I'm Father Cosmas, and Christ is risen. Christos Anesti. Thank you for joining me in my prayer corner at home to share a cup of coffee and chat for a few minutes today. So, yesterday we talked a little bit about sitcoms, and I think we've been talking off and on for the past few weeks about the fact that people are binging and binge watching television. Binge watching has become a phrase that's been popularized over the past, 5 to 10 years, ever since streaming services have become popularized. We've sort of coined this phrase of binge watching. And so I thought I would talk a little bit about binge watching today as a spiritual idea, from a spiritual point of view, as an Orthodox Christian. So again, growing up, obviously we didn't have streaming services. Most of us, we weren't able to binge watch anything. So the idea of binging growing up had a very negative connotation. Growing up, if you mentioned to me binging, I immediately thought purging, binging and purging. So the first thought in my mind would have been some sort of an eating disorder. If you'd have said, what do you associate with binging? Nowadays, if you say binging to someone, they think, well, I'm going to watch, 25 episodes of The Office in a row. Well, it's not the way that it used to be. Binging was something very negative. And so has that changed? Is what we're doing now not negative? Because obviously, binging meant you sort of couldn't control what you were consuming, and you consumed way too much. And so eventually you had to purge. And that's obviously not pretty. Nowadays, is binge watching something that's positive? It's acceptable in that a lot of people do it. We know people are doing it, and we talk about it. But is it positive from a spiritual point of view, or should it still have a negative connotation? And I think hopefully the answer should be obvious to us. It's never a good thing to binge anything ever. It's not an appropriate spiritual concept. You cannot disassociate binging from gluttony, really. I know we're not talking about food, but it's the same sort of concept. Consuming something at an inappropriate amount, too much. It's basically how we would quantify or define that term. And so just because it's not food and it happens to be media content, is that okay? Not really, because it forces us out of balance. The reason that you have to purge after you binge is because you have to regain a sense of balance. You can't just binge. Eventually, you have to purge. Well, as we're binge watching, as we're consuming too much content, media content, where is the purge? Where is the way that we regain our balance? Typically, there isn't one. We just remain out of balance. And we don't know it because we don't happen to have an eating disorder that physically hurts our body. You can sit and watch hour after hour of television, and there's not going to be a lot of physical ramification of that. So this is a problem for us. Binge watching is not something that is really healthy. We joke about it and we talk about it, but realistically, we need to remember to try and stay in balance. So there's nothing wrong with watching TV. Again, in a perfect world, we wouldn't have TVs and need to watch them. We would be doing other more productive things. But again, 99% of our families or more have them and are watching them. I think the question just remains, how do you watch them, have them and watch them, and remain in balance? And that's all we're talking about or considering, especially in these tough times where we're sort of being forced at home and there's only so many things you can do. But realistically, try as best as you can to stay in balance. It's okay to sit down and watch a movie, an episode of a show, maybe even 2 episodes, but we probably shouldn't be sitting down at 7 or 8 o'clock at night and saying, okay, just one more season. That's probably never a sentence you want to say. You never want to say to yourself, just one more season of a show. That's too much. One more episode, okay. If they're 20-minute episodes, half-hour or an hour episodes, set a limit for ourselves so that we stay in balance. Watch a movie. You don't have to sit down and watch an entire trilogy at once and spend 6 to 9 hours watching television, nor should we sit down and watch an entire season, 22 to 24 episodes that are 22, 23 minutes long. You can do the math and figure out that's way too much TV to be watching at one sitting. Try to stay in balance. Watch a little bit of TV, watch a movie here or there, get up, get outside, move around, read a book, pick up our Bibles, read a little bit, say a prayer, talk to someone, spend time with our family, with our kids. Try to stay in balance and remember to try to keep a balance as much as we can, especially now when we're going to be tempted to sort of just shut off our brains and shut off our minds and just sit down sort of turned off like a zombie in front of the television for 4 to 6 to 8 hours. That can't seem healthy if you remove yourself and think about it objectively. It's never good to sort of switch off your brain and sit down for that amount of time and just be consuming, binging media content. So once again, think about the possibility of balancing and about making sure that we're being careful about what we are exposing ourselves to as Orthodox Christians. Once again, may our risen Lord and Savior bless us and keep us this day and every day. Christ is risen.